there's some people that are not happy with the assumption that, it's commonplace that, Michigan, what they're doing with this sign stealing situation and a guy going to games and filming the sideline. They don't want to deal with the reality that this might actually happen in other places, that Michigan didn't have the genius idea of having somebody buying tickets.
Really?
And sitting in the crowd and looking at it. Yeah, there was a little bit of blowback yesterday following the conversation and the one that we had on Friday while in Columbus, as you mentioned.
Yep.
And so who better to discuss this than somebody who's been the most talked about program and the most talked about coach in college football all season long, Deion Sanders. So Deion Sanders weighed in on the
Coach
Michigan sign-stealing controversy. Here was his take.
Everyone's trying to get an edge. I mean, everyone's trying to get whatever edge they can. You could have someone's whole game plan. They could mail it to you. You still got to stop it. So in football, it's not as pronounced as baseball. If I know a curveball is coming, I got you. With football, I don't give a darn if you know a sweep is coming. You still got to stop it. Physically, it's a physical game. You got to stop it. So that's a little tough. I don't buy into a lot of that stuff that someone's stealing this, stealing that. I don't buy into a lot of that stuff. You still got to play the game.
So that was Deion Sanders.
You do still have to play the game, but there is something to knowing what's coming your way, though.
So I'm sure you guys saw this if you've been following the story, and it made me laugh. So did you guys see the clip that was going around social media? It was Ohio State on offense, C.J. Stroud's last year, the Ohio State-Michigan game. And it was a clip of basically Ohio State looking back to their sideline. And then it shows Connor Stallions, the gentleman at Michigan who's been accused of all of this, on Michigan's sideline. And he's pointing up, giving a signal real quick, looking across the field after he sees Ohio State's signal. And the funny thing is like everyone's, see, like look at that. Which I'm like, wow, that's actually legal. Like what he's doing is 100% legal. Happens on every field, every team across the country. Okay. The irony to it though is the result of that particular play was a touchdown pass for Ohio State to Emeka Egbuka. So it's like we're making such a big deal about whatever was taking place or happening at Michigan, even though it goes on everywhere else. Maybe they're not as slick as everyone to hide it, or maybe it's they're doing more advanced scouting in regards to other teams that they're watching and stealing signs for and all that. Yet we're finally getting someone who is probably the best in Deion Sanders to talk about because he played baseball, he played football. He can kind of tell you, like, what kind of impact does this have? And he's like, yeah, you still got to go out and stop the play. This is a prime example of that. Like, you're looking at this clip, and everyone's like, oh, look what they did. Look at this. And it's like, Ohio State threw a touchdown pass the next play. So whatever Michigan's doing, clearly they're not doing it effectively. Yeah, it's not working. Like, now, obviously the result of the game was Ohio State losing to Michigan, which a lot of people will point out, must have been sign stealing. I don't know about you, man. When I go back and watch the tape, Michigan was running between the tackles. Ohio State had an extra guy in the box. They just weren't making plays. Like, when you go back and look at the last 2 years, Ohio State, Michigan, I don't think it's a sign-stealing problem. I don't look at Michigan's success and go, yeah, it's because they're stealing signs. They're a good football team. They've been building towards this for a while. And I think it almost diminishes what those players have done because we've now gotten to the point where we want to try to find a reason for like their success over the past couple of years, and you're taking away from what they're actually doing on the field. So, again, this goes on all over college football. They could fix it rather quickly, and there's a reason. When you talk to other people who are insiders in college football, and they go to these AFCAs, and they talk to coaches, there's a reason why they don't push for it. Because there's a lot of coaches who are really good at this. And there's a lot of coaches who make their name off of this and how they go about calling games offensively and defensively. So if you take it away and you go back to coach the quarterback, it doesn't give them that same advantage that they've had. So a lot of them aren't pushing so hard to get this changed in college football. So I still think the whole conversation around this is being a little bit overblown. I understand if they're doing something that was illegal, that was a rule put in back in the 90s is fine, but we're in 2023. We probably need to go to a system similar to the NFL anyway. And maybe this is the actually way of pushing it forward and pushing the game forward in that respect.
I just still feel like there's some type of agenda against Harbaugh. I don't know what direction it's coming from. I don't know if it's the university. I don't know if it's the Big Ten. I don't know if it's anything else. Someone else. Is it anonymous? Anonymous has been known to get people on social media. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like Anonymous has made fools of people before. I just don't know where it's coming from, but I feel there is no coincidence that it's Michigan, and it's like always seems to be Michigan lately, as of late. And I just don't. I think that whatever it is, if something else were to come up out of this, like if there was something more that comes Michigan's way, I just think it's 100%. It's Harbaugh.
When Jimbo Fisher got upset because Nick Saban called him out last year and made some comments about buying his athletes or buying his players, I think part of what was so upsetting to Jimbo Fisher is because he knew he probably had some stuff on Nick Saban in Alabama, and he couldn't believe that another coach would call him out for doing something that other coaches are doing. And it feels like this is kind of in that same
So another
vein.
coach is calling out Harbaugh.
Yeah, like they probably complained and went to and people within Michigan, because Deion Sanders is saying, look, I don't necessarily buy into that, because he probably knows in talking with people, yeah, this is kind of commonplace, but you just don't rat out somebody else just because you're pissed. Like I don't get pulled over and then call 911 and say, what about that guy? He was speeding too. Like, yeah, we get it. Everybody's kind of doing the same thing. You're just the one that got the blame. And it feels like with Michigan and just sort of the pushback and everybody coming after him, I'll bet if you polled coaches anonymously around the country and said, hey, how commonplace is this? Majority of them would say,
I just wonder why
yes.
it wasn't Toledo. Why wasn't it Akron?
It's
Right.
not juicy enough.
Why wasn't it the University of Delaware?
It's not juicy enough.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like this just, it stinks of something. There's an agenda here, an agenda. When you study, I talked about talking to my son and studying film and putting in the time. If you put in the time to study film, and I know us as Penn State fans, we know this, you can decipher the DNA of an offense. There's only so many things a lineman can do. So if you're watching film, you're studying a lineman, there's only so many things a lineman can do. And oftentimes what they do pre-snap, how they line up, like if you got a very, very good pass rusher that is quick off the edge, I don't care what you think, that tackle is not going to be heavy on their hand. They're going to be sitting back, 3-point stance, right, or 2-point stance most likely, or super light hand, 3-point stance with their hand down, and they're going to escape. They're going to retreat to get back. There's certain things that if you watch the film, okay, you see the sign, you still know, okay, this person here, this split by this receiver, it shows play action, it shows possible reverse, it shows a possible jet sweep, it shows a crosser or a bootleg. You can get all of that by watching the film regardless. Now, if they put wrinkles in, and you stay true to your keys. But to say you're stealing signs, if you're watching film of teams, you're still going to get an opportunity to put together a game plan as to what you want to do. And if you're doing it for the defense, well, that's stupid, because a defense is going to run generally the same type of stuff. They may start with man. They might be man heavy, or they might be a zone heavy team. And all you have to do is watch the film to see where they're aligning and what they want to take away based off of what the game plan is. Like, so in stealing signs, I'm not certainly sure as to what the distinct, I would need somebody to educate me on what the distinct, advantage is that you receive by stealing the signs.
I also think that, and we've talked about this a little bit yesterday, that there have been teams that have suspected Michigan of doing this, and so they switched to wristbands. A lot of teams this year switched to wristbands, and the result is they've lost by like 35 a game. And
how's that worked out?
Yeah,
how's that worked out?
And I also saw that Ohio State actually suspected this last year before the game, and they were using majority of their calls on the wristband. And guess what? They still got their ass beat.
They still lost.
But what are we doing here?
We're making a big deal about something because of what LaVar said. It's Jim Harbaugh. It's Michigan, and he's already ticked off the NCAA. Like the whole investigation during the recruiting dead period, where he wasn't helpful or cooperative in the investigation. He ticked some people off. And so then there was that, and then he ticked off the athletic director. Like right now, there's not a great relationship between the athletic director and Jim Harbaugh because of how things were handled last offseason when he was, potentially looking at NFL jobs. So there's a lot of things that are fishy to me about this, to LaVar's point, as far as, well, why is it now? Why is it Michigan? If people have known this for years, why is it just coming out right now? Why have teams allowed this to go on? I said, one, because they're probably doing it too. And then two, because there's something else at hand here. Mm-hmm. So someone's behind the scenes trying to do something. Because the other thing is if you've got a guy who's supposedly so renowned for his decoding skills, how could you be so blatant, and how could you be this poor at covering up your tracks if you're doing something that is illegal or trying to do it? And a lot of other people do this, mind you. It all comes off as incredibly fishy. Like there's much more to this that we're really not getting the full story. Yeah. Either way, though, I hope it advances the game to a point where, like, I've been critical of this when people ask, hey, why scoring down in the NFL? And I've said, well, how much time you got? Because there's a number of things you can point to, but my perspective only comes from the quarterback position. And even though that position looks at things from a higher level, I still just say, okay, let's just look from the quarterback perspective. Nowadays, since junior high potentially, these young men are not being taught to look at what's in front of them. They clap their hands, they say their cadence, they look to the sidelines. It's like in our society, it's what we look at. We're looking to something else to give us the answer. Like, we don't experience life first. We go Google something. And that's like kind of what this is. We look out at the field, and then we look over the sideline and get the play we need to run. Instead of teaching kids like, hey, they're in a 4-down front or a 3-down front. This is what you want to do from a run blocking standpoint. This is who the middle linebacker is. That sets up the blocking scheme. This is what you do. And don't tell me you can't do it, because we had an elaborate playbook when I was in junior high. We had check with me's, we had audibles, all that stuff. Like when you start thinking like young people aren't capable of doing more, that's your problem, not their problem. Young people are incredibly capable of learning a lot and doing a lot. And yet we want to take the decision-making out of the quarterback's hands, out of players' hands at a young age. And so junior high, high school, college now, they get there and they just look at the sideline. They're always looking to someone else to give them the answer instead of coaching them during the week to when they walk out there on the field, they've got the answers. Like I still remember when Charlie Weiss got to Notre Dame, and it was a New England Patriots playbook. My senior year, we went no huddle. We had a wristband. He'd throw in a play, and I'd look at it, and I'd be like, yeah, no, we're going to run this. Because we got the technique we want on this side. We got a 3-man side. We can run this inside zone run. Or we can run this outside zone run over here. We got a 7 technique. We can reach him. Or, hey, we're going to run a play action. They got an extra guy in the box. We're going to fake right at that guy. We're going to throw a little post in behind him. Like, we could do whatever we want. It was the coolest thing in the world. And yet nowadays coaches take that out of quarterbacks and players' hands. And so to me, hopefully this leads to coaches then preparing players to then actually go out there and play the game of football and understand the game of football, so they don't need to look to the sideline anymore. They can just go out there and execute, and they can understand coverages and fronts and everything else. Because if that happens, then you get these quarterbacks, these young men, when they get the NFL level, they're much more prepared for what they're asked to do at that level as a professional, because they're being treated like they're a professional, at least at the college level now.